A buddy of mine brought his wife's Camry into the dealership last April for a brake fluid flush. They charged him $189. The invoice said, "Brake system service," and listed 45 minutes of labor at $130 an hour, plus $12 for a quart of DOT3 fluid. That same quart of DOT3 sits on the shelf at Walmart right now for $5.98. The job took the technician about 15 minutes, and the tool that makes it a one-person job costs less than $10. But my buddy didn't know any of that, because nobody told him, and the shop had no reason to. That price gap, $189 for 15 minutes and $6 of fluid, is not a mistake, and it is not greed. It is a business model, and it works because of one specific lie that has been repeated so many times it became true. I am going to show you what that lie is, how brake fluid actually fails, and the exact method you can use in your own driveway to do this job yourself. When you see how simple it is, you will understand why shops never volunteer it. My name is Walt Renner. I ran a repair shop for 41 years in Wisconsin. I have no brand deals, no affiliate links, and no reason to shade the truth in either direction. What I have is a bench where I watched this same job get marked up for 4 decades, and I kept notes. That gap between what a job actually costs and what you get charged runs across every product you buy, not just brake fluid. I keep a set of notes on how to catch it. 4 questions, a database directory, a seal decoder, the bench test, $49, waltrenner.com. I will not bring it up again. Here is what brake fluid actually does, because most people have never thought about it. When you press the brake pedal, you are pushing a piston inside a master cylinder. That piston compresses fluid, and because fluid does not compress, the force travels through steel and rubber lines to your calipers, where it squeezes pads against a spinning rotor. That is the entire system. No electronics in the basic loop, no computer, no sensors. Hydraulic pressure, straight mechanical leverage, invented before your grandparents were born. But here is the problem nobody explains until it is too late. That fluid, DOT3, DOT4, DOT 5.1, whichever your car calls for, is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air. Not maybe, not if conditions are bad. Always. Every year, DOT3 fluid absorbs 1 to 2% water by volume, just sitting in your brake lines. That moisture gets in through microscopic pores in the rubber hoses, past the seal on the master cylinder cap, and every time someone pops the reservoir lid to check the level. Why does that matter? Because water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and your brakes generate a lot more heat than that. Fresh DOT3 fluid has a minimum dry boiling point of 401 degrees, set by the federal standard FMVSS 116. DOT4 starts at 446 degrees. DOT 5.1, which you will find mostly on European performance cars, starts at 500 degrees. Those are your safety margins. And every year, moisture is eating them. The federal test standard uses 3.7% water content as the definition of worn-out fluid. That is not a theoretical ceiling. It is what happens inside actual brake lines in 2 to 3 years of normal driving. At that contamination level, DOT4 fluid drops from 446 degrees down to about 311 degrees, and some DOT3 formulations fall below 284. That is a boiling point loss of over 100 degrees from just sitting in the car. No track days, no towing, no hard driving of any kind. Just commuting, parking, and absorbing moisture through hoses and seals that are doing exactly what they are supposed to do. When brake fluid boils, it creates gas bubbles in the lines. And gas compresses, which is the whole problem, because fluid does not. So you press the pedal, and instead of moving the caliper piston, you are just squeezing gas. The pedal goes soft, then it goes to the floor, and then you are a passenger in a 2-ton machine with no way to stop it. That is vapor lock, and it does not announce itself with a warning light or a gradual decline. It happens the first time you need the brakes hard, which means the first time you need them most is the first time they are not there. Now here is where it gets expensive if you ignore it. Your brake system has steel lines with copper brazing on the inside seams. Those lines are designed to be seamless, but the copper is the first metal in the system to start corroding when the fluid picks up moisture and the corrosion inhibitors break down. The industry standard copper test strip, the ones shops use to justify a fluid service, measures dissolved copper in parts per million. At 150 parts per million, the fluid has reached what the test manufacturers call its virtual age threshold, roughly equivalent to 2 years of normal use regardless of mileage. At 200 parts per million, the fluid's ability to protect your brake system internals from corrosion is effectively gone. At that point, the moisture is not just lowering your boiling point, it is eating the metal from the inside. Caliper pistons corrode and seize. Wheel cylinders pit. And the most expensive casualty is the ABS module, because corroded fluid pushes debris into the solenoid valves and pump, and an ABS module replacement runs $1,000 to $3,500 depending on the vehicle, all to avoid changing a fluid that costs $6 a quart. So why does almost nobody change it? Because manufacturers do not make it easy to know when, and that is not an accident. Toyota recommends brake fluid changes every 2 years, or 20,000 miles. Honda says every 3 years. BMW says every 2 years and includes it in the maintenance package. Subaru lists it every 30,000 miles. But some manufacturers, and I will not pretend to understand why, simply do not list it at all. The fluid sits there absorbing moisture year after year, and the maintenance schedule says nothing about it until you show up at the dealer with a spongy pedal. The 2012 Camry maintenance schedule runs to 120,000 miles and 12 years without a single brake fluid change listed. The fluid specification is right there in the owner's manual. The change interval is not. So the only time you hear about it is when the dealer recommends it at $150 to $225. And by then, most people figure the dealer is just upselling. And this is where the lie lives. The reason that invoice looks the way it does is not that the job is hard. It is not that the materials are expensive. It is that most car owners have been led to believe they need specialized equipment to do it. That word, specialized, is doing more work than any wrench in the shop. It is the reason $6 of fluid becomes a $200 line item. The traditional way to bleed brakes requires 2 people. One person sits in the car pumping the pedal. The other person opens and closes the bleeder valve on each caliper in sequence, catching the old fluid in a bottle. That is literally the entire procedure. But most people do not have a helper available on a Saturday afternoon, and the idea of needing 2 people makes the job sound complicated enough that paying somebody else feels reasonable. What the shops do not mention is that a 1-person brake bleeder hose has existed for decades. It is a clear tube with a check valve inside it. You connect one end to the bleeder valve on your caliper and drop the other end into a catch bottle. The check valve lets fluid and air out when you pump the pedal, but it closes when you release the pedal, so air cannot backtrack into the line. You do not need a helper. You do not need a $300 vacuum pump. You need this hose, a box wrench, and a bottle of fluid. The hose costs $7 to $10 at any auto parts store. The whole setup, hose and fluid, runs under $20. Here is the method, step by step, the way I have done it for 30 years. First, check your owner's manual for the correct brake fluid specification, DOT3, DOT4, or DOT 5.1. Do not guess. Do not mix silicone-based DOT5 into a glycol system. That will destroy seals and cost you real money. Second, pop the hood and find the master cylinder reservoir. It is on the driver's side firewall, usually a translucent plastic container with a screw cap or a snap-on lid. Open it. Suck out as much of the old fluid as you can with a turkey baster or a cheap fluid syringe from the auto parts store. Refill the reservoir to the max line with fresh fluid. This step alone replaces the worst of the old fluid sitting at the top of the system. Third, start with the wheel farthest from the master cylinder. On most cars, that is the right rear. Jack up that corner, remove the wheel, and locate the bleeder valve on the caliper. It is a small nipple, usually with a rubber dust cap over it, and it takes an 8mm or a 10mm wrench depending on the vehicle. Use a 6-point wrench or socket, not 12-point. 12-point wrenches round off bleeder valves, and a rounded bleeder valve turns a 15-minute job into a caliper replacement. Now, here is the one thing that trips people up, and I want you to hear it clearly. Before you put any wrench on that bleeder valve, spray it with penetrating oil. PB Blaster, Croil, even liquid wrench. Let it soak for 15 minutes. Bleeder valves are steel screwed into aluminum or cast iron, and they corrode. If you try to force a corroded bleeder, you will snap it off, and then you are buying a new caliper. Patience on this step saves you $200. After the penetrating oil has soaked, fit the 6-point wrench on the bleeder, and try tightening it just barely, maybe 1/10 of a turn. Sometimes that initial tighten breaks the corrosion bond, then loosen it a 1/4 turn. If it will not move, tap the wrench handle with a hammer, not hard, just enough to send vibration through the threads. If it still will not budge, soak it again overnight and try tomorrow. Do not force it. A snapped bleeder is the one thing that turns this job from 15 minutes into a parts store run. Once the bleeder moves, you have options. The check valve hose is the fastest one-person method, but gravity bleeding works too if you are patient. With gravity, you just open the bleeder, let the weight of the fluid push old fluid out on its own, and keep topping off the reservoir. It takes longer, maybe 45 minutes instead of 20, but it requires zero pumping. Some people also install speed bleeders, which are replacement bleeder screws with a built-in check valve. They cost about $10 to $15 for a pair, and once they are in, every future bleed is even simpler. For today, I am describing the check valve hose method because it is the best balance of speed and cost for a first-timer. Attach your check valve hose. Crack the bleeder open about a 1/4 turn. Get in the car, pump the brake pedal slowly 3 or 4 times, hold it down on the last pump, then release. Watch the hose. You will see dark, dirty fluid and possibly air bubbles moving through the tube. Keep pumping until the fluid coming out is clean and clear, matching the color of the fresh fluid you put in the reservoir. Between every 4 or 5 pumps, go back to the reservoir and top it off. If you let the reservoir run dry, you will pull air into the master cylinder and have to start over from scratch. That is the one mistake that matters. Close the bleeder valve, snug it gently, move to the left rear, then right front, then left front. Same process each wheel. The whole job takes 20 to 30 minutes once you have the rhythm. One safety note, and I mean this seriously. When you are done, sit in the car, pump the brake pedal 5 or 6 times, and make sure it feels firm and high before you move the car. If the pedal feels spongy or goes more than halfway to the floor, you still have air in a line. Go back and re-bleed that corner. Do not drive on a soft pedal. This is your braking system. There is no partial credit. Now, I want to tell you why shops will never teach you this. And I want to be fair here, because this is the part where people expect me to say mechanics are crooks, and that is not what I am saying. The mechanic working on your car probably knows this job takes 15 minutes and costs $6 in fluid. But the mechanic does not set the prices. The service writer does. And the service writer answers to a business model that treats brake fluid service as a profit center. The markup is not on the labor, and it is not on the fluid. The markup is on the belief that you cannot do it yourself. Think about what the shop is actually selling. The fluid costs them about $4 wholesale for a quart, and they use less than a quart on most cars. The check valve hose they use is the same one you can buy for $8, except theirs is bolted to a rolling cart with a brand name on it that justifies the line item. The technician doing the work learned how in an afternoon. What is left to charge for? the idea that this job requires their facility. That belief is the product being sold to you. It is the same pattern across every service counter where a simple job gets wrapped in just enough unfamiliar language that you stop asking what it actually involves. The fluid is not the product, just the receipt. And I want to argue against myself for a second, because it is honest, and you deserve it. There are cars where a brake bleed is genuinely more complicated. Some newer vehicles with integrated electronic brake modules require a scan tool to cycle the ABS pump during the bleed. If your car has electronic brake force distribution that activates solenoids inside the ABS unit, a simple pedal bleed may not push fluid through every passage. If you are working on one of those systems, a shop with the right diagnostic equipment earns that fee. I am not telling you every shop charge is a scam. I am telling you that on 9 out of 10 passenger cars on the road, the standard four-wheel bleed I just described is the exact same procedure the shop performs, and they charge you 10 to 15 times the material cost to do it. Here is one more thing while we are being honest. If your brake fluid has not been changed in 5 or more years, the first time you bleed it may pull some ugly surprises. Fluid that has been sitting that long can push corroded debris into ABS valves when it finally moves. On a badly neglected system, the right call might be a professional flush with equipment that can backflush the ABS module. Use your judgment. If the fluid coming out looks like coffee, slow down and consider what you are pushing through the system before you push it. The people who lose money on brake fluid are not the ones who change it themselves for $20 once a year. They are the ones who never change it at all, and 5 years later they are looking at corroded calipers at $200 per corner, seized bleeder valves that snap off and force a full caliper replacement, and a $1,400 ABS module rebuild, or $3,500 for a new one on a German car that a $6 bottle of fluid would have prevented. Run the math over 10 years. DIY bleeding once a year costs you about $120 total, fluid and one hose that lasts the whole decade. The same job at a shop costs you somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. And neither number accounts for the component damage you prevent by keeping fresh fluid in the system, because that damage does not show up on the invoice until the pedal is already on the floor. One bottle of DOT3 or DOT4 fluid, a check valve hose, a 6-point wrench, 30 minutes in your driveway. That is the whole job. The only equipment it requires is the willingness to get under the car and do it, and that is the one piece of equipment no shop can sell you. Do one thing this weekend. Pop the hood, pull the cap off your master cylinder, and look at the fluid. If it is clear amber, you are fine. If it is dark brown or black, it has been absorbing moisture for years, and your boiling point is not where you think it is. Buy the $6 bottle and change it. That is the start. Tell me below, what is the most you have ever been charged for a brake fluid service? And how long had the fluid been in the car? I want to see the numbers. Next time, the one brake component that wears out on every car and costs $400 to replace at a shop, except the part itself is $11 and the tool to install it already lives in your kitchen drawer. You will want to see that one. This was never about brake fluid, friend. It was about being a person who checks the price before somebody else decides it for you.